In the previous video, we have ensured that all our houses are pointing in the correct direction. Now, I'm going to tweak the lighting a little bit, change the rotation on x-axis to be 60, on y to be 0, and I'm going to increase the intensity to be 2. And let's play now. We should see a difference. We should be able to see the houses much better. Okay, great. So now we can see that everything seems to be all right. And what we will do now is we need to create a special class that will hold the reference to what type of building do we want to place, and also the size of it and the count. So how many of those structures do we want to place on our map? And we will use this to instantiate many different structures on our map so that there is some variety, and this will look much nicer then. So let's get to it. Let's stop the game. Let's go to scripts folder and let's create a new C# script. Let's call it house type. Okay, and let's open it up. Great. Now what we need to do here is to delete the monobehavior inheritance and add attribute to our class. This will be serializable. I need to click Alt Enter and say using system to make it serializable. And now we should be able to view every parameter inside the inspector. So what we will need to do now is to create some variables. First one will be private game objects array prefabs. And we need to add an attribute serialized field to be able to fill it in the editor. Those will be the prefabs that we will want to use for this house type. So we may have different basic houses, different apartments, and we may want the algorithm to choose one of those. So to do that, we will need to create some methods, but first let's implement some more variables. So first we will need public int size required. So this is the size that the house or the structure rather requires to be placed. Next, we'll implement public int quantity, and we will create public int quantity already placed. So this will be a count of how many structures have we already placed on our map. And let's create 2 or 3 methods. Let's create public game object get prefab. And this method will simply return us our prefab. So we are going to add quantity already placed ++, and if our prefabs.length, so our array has length greater than 1, we are going to create var random equals unity engine.random.range. We're going to choose from 0 to our prefabs.length. So we are going to basically choose the random prefab and return it. Return prefabs of index random. Else, we are going to return the first element from our array, trusting that we have such element. We are not going to implement additional checks here. And next, we will create public full is building available. And this will basically return if quantity already placed is less than quantity. If we have already placed a couple of buildings and this is enough, so we do not want to place any more, we will return false here and we will skip to the next house type. But if we haven't placed all the structures of this type, we will place some more. And last method that we will need is public void reset, which will simply set our quantity already placed to be 0. So this will be useful when we implement a button to recreate our town. Okay, save this class, go back to Unity. Now we need to go back to our structural helper. So let's open it up. Great. Now what we need to do is, instead of this prefab, we are going to create public building type, or rather house type. We have implemented, and let's call it building types. We may use Ctrl+RR to change this to building type as well. Great. Okay, I added too many words here. Great. So now we have refactored the name of our class. So now we have those building types, and we should be able to choose which one to place. So let's slide down, and we cannot really instantiate anything right now. And this is because we need to loop through each building type. So let's create here a for loop. And we are going to say loop through all the building types dot length. Okay, and we are going to use this array as the first rule, or the first structure will be the most important. When it is placed, we are going to go to the next one and the next one, and this is important because we are going to place the biggest structures first, and then go down the list until we reach a prefab such as house that can be continuously placed. So if our building type I quantity is equal to -1, and our house type will have the quantity of -1, then we know that we can safely place it. But because this will be at the end, we'll loop through some other cases. So if our building types of index I is building available, so this will return us if this building was already placed enough times, or can we place it again. So if it wasn't placed enough times, then we can check if our building types of index I size required is greater than 1. So this will indicate that we have to calculate something else to place this building. So else, and here we can copy this instantiation, and what we will do here is call var. Instead of this instantiation, basically we are going to call var building equals, we are going to create a special method spawn prefab, to which we are going to pass our building types of index I, get prefab. We're going to pass pre-spot.key to have the position and our rotation. Okay, so we can Alt-Enter on this method and generate it in our class. Now, what we need to do more is we are going to add this building to our building dictionary. And we do not have our building dictionary, so let's set it up. And we have our structures dictionary. Okay, so our structures dictionary. And we are going to add the pre-spot key, which is the position, and the building we have returned here. Great. So let's go to this spawn prefab method. And here it is. We don't want to return object, rather game object. Great. Let's rename the variables to be prefab, our position, and our rotation is correct. Now here we are going to call var new structure equals instantiate our prefab, our position, our rotation, and our transform as the parent. to instantiate this new structure in hierarchy under the object of type structure helper. Now we need to do this because later, if you have followed, for example, my procedural map generator tutorial, we're going to add to it an animation. For now, let's just return this new structure. Great. So we have all that. Let's slide up and let's deal with this issue, with this case when we have a quantity -1. So here, if quantity is -1, we can copy the code from below. So var building equals spawn prefab. We are going to add it to our structure dictionary, and we are going to break from this loop. So this should ensure that we have the same functionality right now after we add our structure type, or rather building type. So let's go back to Unity. Okay, after your code compiles, we need to choose our structure helper, and we have different building types. So let's add one for now, and we can see that we now have those prefabs. So let's lock it with this lock in the top right corner. Let's go to prefabs, let's choose those two houses, and let's drag them to the prefabs array. Now, size required is 1 for those houses, the quantity will be -1, and that's basically it. So now we should be able to place those houses just like before, but now we should be able to choose between those two houses. So let's press play. And we can see that now we have this type of house and this type of house placed. So now this gives us some possibilities, because we can add something more here and we can place those houses as well. So let's try it out, because we have the logic. Let's check the code. So we have the logic implemented for -1, and if the size is less or equal to 1. So that's great. So we can go to Unity and let's add another type. And as I said before, we need to add those types that the last one has -1 quantity. So instead here we are going to change the first prefab quantity to 5, for example, and instead of those two we are going to use our apartments, for example. So we want to have 5 apartments and the rest of the structures will be houses. So if we try running it now, we will run into an exception, and that is because I have not implemented fully the for loop. So let's go back to our class, our structure helper, and in this for loop we are looping through each of those building types, but we need to break out of a loop if we decide on one. So that's why in this else statement we will need to call break, as well as here in this if statement we will need to call break. Actually, we could possibly call break at the end after this if else check. Okay, great. Now let's go back to Unity. Let's try playing again. And we can see that we have our 5 apartments in the middle. So this is quite important fact, because we are using the same order that we have placed our road. So let's see the road. The first road is this one. The second is this one. So if we want to add more apartments, we would place all the apartments on this side and then start placing the houses. So this is one of the issues with this implementation, but I'm quite sure that we can change the order or modify it as we please by playing around with the collections that we are storing the road with. But this placement allows us to create a center of a town here, in the center of a town. And by definition, the towns grows outwards. So from the center, the town would grow in this direction and in this direction. So in my opinion, this creates a pretty realistic town where the biggest buildings are in its center, and then on the suburbs are the small houses. And next, what we need to tackle on is placing structures that are of greater size than 1. This we will tackle in the next episode.